right, good evening, everybody. It is 8:30. We're going to get started here. If you could find a seat. My name is Brian, and I'm an alcoholic. Welcome to the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. A couple quick announcements. This group does have a Facebook page and a website with information for this group and for events around the area involving AA. We have flyers in the back there with happenings. If you have any celebrations, anniversaries, things you want to post, or bring a flyer in, post it to the Facebook page, Conscious Contact Speaker Group. We have recordings of all speakers. If you want the CD for a past speaker, you can talk to me or Ron. If you want the CD for tonight, you can get it on Thursday at our sister group, a Big Book Study up at Salem Church. Or you can get it here next Saturday. Teresa's going to come up here. She's going to chair the meeting. You guys have a good time.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Teresa, and I'm an alcoholic. Welcome to the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is a one-hour speaker meeting that meets every Saturday right here at St. Paul's Lutheran Church in Doylestown. The business meeting for this group meets every Saturday at 7 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. right here. The purpose of the group is to provide a consistent message of hope and recovery through God reliance and service to others through the practice and teaching of the 12 steps. We record all speakers so that others may benefit from their message of recovery. If you wish not to be recorded, simply ask. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. The group would like to welcome everyone, especially newcomers. Is there anyone new or from out of town that would like to introduce themselves with their first name?
My name is Dennis, I'm an alcoholic.
Anyone is the alcoholic?
I live in Chicago.
My name is Billy, I'm an alcoholic.
I'm an alcoholic. Hi, how you doing, Pat? Alcoholic. Yo, Pat.
Welcome, everyone. The Conscious Contact Speaker Group encourages sponsorship. Would anyone with working knowledge of the 12 steps and is willing to sponsor, please raise your hands. Are there any announcements for the good of AA? We have meeting lists and big books on easy terms. Please see me or any home group member after the meeting. If you cannot afford a big book, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group will give you one at no charge. Anyone willing to make donations for the purchase of big books and CDs to help those who can't afford them can put donations in the jar on the table marked Big Book and CD Donations. If you would like a CD of any speaker past or present, see me or Ron after the meeting. They are available free of charge. Tonight, Jillian is going to read the preamble.
I'm Jillian, I'm an alcoholic. The AA Preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organizations, or institutions, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help alcoholics achieve sobriety. I have Maggie coming up to read the 12 steps of recovery.
Hi, I'm Maggie, I'm an alcoholic. The AA 12 Steps of Recovery. 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Now I give the meeting back to Teresa.
The seventh tradition. Every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. At this time, I would like to pass the baskets. We have no dues or fees, but we have expenses. The group provides many services. Your donations cover rent, big books, CDs, events, and workshops. A reminder that there is absolutely no smoking on the church property. Please take a moment to silence all cell phones and limit movement during the meeting to avoid distractions. So tonight, please help me welcome a good friend to the Conscious Contact Speaker Group, coming all the way from California, Georgia B. from the Pacific Group.
Hi everyone, my name is Georgia. I'm an alcoholic. Grateful to be here and to be sober. Thank you for your hospitality. Thank you, Ron, for inviting me. AA is such a small world today. It's made the world such a small world today. I have friends kind of everywhere I go now, which is so nice. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous when I was 24, and I was like the loneliest person I knew, because I only thought about myself constantly, so I didn't really realize other people felt that way. But and today I have this big, beautiful life as a result of Alcoholics Anonymous. I have a kind of freedom that I never even knew existed, nor did I know I wanted, which is I am the person I am tonight at the meeting is the same person I am with my friends, with my boyfriend, at work, in a board meeting. You know, I'm the same person everywhere. There's nothing you can know about me today that can hurt me. I used to have so many secrets and worry about who knows what, and kind of the rule of thumb is if I don't want somebody talking about something, rather than be mad at them for telling people the thing, I just need to not do that thing. And it just makes everything so much easier. Like today I don't worry about people talking behind my back or all of those things that just kept my world so small and kept me in fear and dependent on your approval. Your approval was my first higher power. I needed that like I needed air. And today I have complete freedom. It's so something I just didn't even know I wanted. You know, I got here when I was 24. I thought my life was over. I started drinking really young, and so I only knew the way of the drink. I couldn't imagine my life without it. And now these last 26 years, I've been sober since February 1st, 1993, have been just such a trip. I've learned part of my third step practice is to say yes when I'm asked to do something. Not just in AA, in general. If my calendar's open, I say yes, which it's gonna sound hokey, but I think of it as like God keeping my calendar. And so when somebody asks me to do something, if I open my calendar and it's open, I say yes. And sometimes I'm like, please let me be booked. But I never want to do anything. Really, if I were left to do what I want to do, it would be lay in bed and watch reruns of Law and Order and Sex and the City, which I did today. In between, I spoke at the farm this morning and then had some downtime today, and I got both Sex and the City and Law and Order in. Yes. But left to my own devices, that's what I would do every day. And because I've learned here how I feel doesn't matter, what I do matters, I say yes when I'm asked to do something. And as the result of that, I've been on this incredible adventure the last 26 years. So I'll just kind of get to the stuff. So I was raised by a single mom, and my dad died of cancer when I was 6, and I was daddy's little girl, and I was devastated when he died and didn't understand why he died, so much so that I shared it in my first grade class for show and tell. I got up in front of the class and I said, boys and girls, for show and tell today, I would like to share that my daddy died. And I'm laughing now, not funny then, obviously, but I remember the teacher kind of grabbing me and pulling me aside, but I just didn't understand, and I waited out front every day for him to come home, and my mom was depressed and angry and miserable, and she did not sign up to raise a kid by herself. when she had me, she was 38, and back in the 60s, that was like an old parent. Now people have kids way later, but she was considered an older parent then, and she had to work 3 jobs to support us. When my dad died, she didn't know how to drive, she didn't work, and so she found a job that had a similar schedule to my school schedule, which was working in a school cafeteria, and then every day after that, she'd clean a different person's house every day of the week, and then on the weekend, she'd clean a church. And so when she was at home, she would sit in front of the TV. Strange, that's kind of where my go-to too. She'd sit in front of the TV and smoke her more menthols and cuss at the world and yell at our cats, and did not want to be bothered with me at all. Like, I would walk through the door and say something like, hello, and she'd be like, not now! She was already like at 10 with me just saying hello. And so I learned to find my love in other places. Now, on the outside, what that looked like was I was kind of a hoe, but in my heart, that's not what it looked like. Now, I didn't really get to see my part in that until I got to the 4th column of the 4th step when we look at our faults. But back then, I just really felt like I was just looking for love. I just needed somebody to love me. I was so lonely. I was that kind of bone-chilling lonely that only another alcoholic can identify with. And so I couldn't articulate it at the time, but I had this sense that if somebody loved me, I would be okay. And that's what I learned on all the television shows I was watching. It's what I learned in the movies. You know, once you find love, everything falls into place. You don't really even need to have a plan. You just got to get the love. And it wasn't until I had double-digit sobriety that I learned that a man is not a plan. What? Like, I wasted so many years with, the man plan, and I was just always looking for somebody to love me. My drinking started very early on. I have a picture when I'm 11 months old and my dad is tipping a beer stein back and I'm drinking out of it, and I thought, well, maybe that was my first drink. I always hear people talk about their first drink, and I don't remember my first drink. So I saw that picture, I'm like, I have my first drink, but not really. But over the years, I feel like I kind of just tapered on. It just became more and more. I took more sips, drank more, then suddenly I'm drinking. I always looked older than I was. I always felt older than I was. When I was 10 years old, I had a 16-year-old boyfriend, which is super creepy and gross, but I was hanging out with the older kids, and that's what they were doing. And so by the time I was 11, I was arrested for drinking in public. I lost my virginity at 12 because an older guy, he was 19, I couldn't bear the thought of him not liking me. And so I drank and used over that, and actually I had my first suicide attempt after that. And then by the time I was 13, I was pregnant, and I terminated that pregnancy at the urging of my mom and my boyfriend. And I didn't want to do that. I don't know what I wanted to do, but it wasn't that. And so I did that, and then I drank and used over that, and I had another suicide attempt at 13. And my daily get down during those years was, I was student body president in 6th grade. Then by 7th grade, I'm dropping out because I wake up every morning, not really on time for school, so I'm late, so I meet my stoner friends at school. We don't go into class, we just hook up at school. We go steal a bottle at the local Safeway. We go to the park, we get drunk, then we go back to school at snack, and we, and run around. And I remember sliding across the quad on my face, chipping my teeth, scraping up my face. That was the first time somebody told my mom I should be in Alcoholics Anonymous, to which she just thought that was the most ridiculous thing. And just a side note to that, my friend Billy Ann says it's hard to have a disease that your family doesn't believe in, and that's sort of what my family just thought, that was ridiculous. My mom and grandma were drinkers from way back, and so were all of their parents and grandparents and so on. But so I would drink, get super drunk, bring some people back to my house while my mom was at work. Maybe we'd watch Brady Bunch and Gilligan's Island, and I'd make French fries. We had a deep fryer. I'd always make French fries and scrape pipes and try and just get stoned and as drunk as we could get. And I might be waking up from a drunk when my mom's coming home from work, only to go out that night and drink again. And that's kind of what my days looked like over and over. And so it was hard to stay in school. So I was dropping out and then going to summer school or continuation to get to the next grade. Very early on, my mom said, you know what, you're going to do what you're going to do anyway. And if you're going to drink and smoke, I'd rather you do it at home. And so I take things very literally. I'm like, cool. So I turned my room into this party room. I used to have a shelf where I kept all my empty bottles because I was so proud of them. So pathetic now. I see in old pictures, there's like my little record player, and then above my record player are all these bottles of booze that I drank, so if you came over, I might be like, like other people would have awards on their wall. So pathetic. But my mom also believed that if something were on sale and you didn't buy it, you were actually losing money, which worked in my benefit because she would find like beer on sale. So like you could buy 1 case of Meisterbrow and you get the 2nd case free. So she'd bring that home and give that to me. Or one night she came home with a bottle of tequila, and if you bought the tequila, you got the matching shot glasses. And so she said, I got this for you and your friend Ellen, so when she comes over on Thursday night to watch The Facts of Life, you can drink it. There's so many things wrong with that sentence. Because there was still that sweet, innocent part of me that was watching, Tootie and the girls on The Facts of Life. You take the good, you take the bad, you take them all, and then you have, whoa, I guess I can't get down too much up here. For those listening at home, I was dancing. So my friend would come over, we'd watch The Facts of Life, and usually we drink 7 and 7 and then go out and try and find parties, because you got to get your buzz on before you go out, because you don't know if there's going to be enough wherever you're going. So in this case, we were fine drinking tequila that night, but that's kind of what my life looked like. And my mom really had given up. She didn't have any friends. She never dated again after my dad died. She was just more or less depressed and angry. Though every once in a while, like on a weekend, she put on music, and she had this really eclectic taste in music, which I'm grateful for, because I have that same thing. And so music was a big part of my life growing up. Music was able to say things that I couldn't express. I felt these horrible ways. I felt so terrible, but I couldn't put it into words, but the songs could, the lyrics could. And so that was a big part of my life too. And I also adopted every wild animal that there was, with the promise that I would take care of it. So at one point in my teens, we had 13 cats. We lived in a house back in the day. You didn't have to lock your doors during the day. So we had a side door that was open all the time, a bathroom window that was open all the time, and a front door that was it was a split door, so we'd have the bottom closed. So it wasn't like they were all cooped up, but they were in and out all the time. And I would have people partying in my room, and I'd hear my mom in the living room. I'd have all my friends over, and she'd be watching TV, which is already embarrassing, smoking her cigarettes, yelling at the TV, and now I would hear, "Get down!" which was so embarrassing, because she'd be yelling at one of the cats who got up on, a counter or something. And the way I dealt with that is, we made it a game, and every time my mom yelled, "Get down," no matter what we were doing, we would stop and we'd get down. And that's just, I kind of learned just to get through life like that, just to make fun of the things that embarrassed me. I drank like a pig always. Clearly I wasn't drinking socially at 11 when I was arrested, or, all those other times that I got into trouble. Drinking was always a problem for me, because I'm an alcoholic, because alcohol affects me differently than it does my fellows. And I have some friends who, gave it a good try, but they didn't like how it made them feel. They didn't like being out of control, which is, I don't understand. It's not how I roll. When I start drinking, all bets are off. I can't just say I'm going to have one, because once I have one, it's an e-ticket. I'm on my way somewhere. I don't quite know where, and I won't know until tomorrow, I identify as an alcoholic, but I believe my alcoholism gets me wherever I'm weak. So that can be food, sex, money, drugs, whatever. And in my case, it was all those areas. And one area especially was when I was 13, I started starving myself. And when I was 17, I started throwing up. So I'd be skinny and perfect. So maybe, just maybe, you would love me. Because I hated myself so desperately, which I didn't think was self-obsession. I thought thinking you were great was self-obsession. I didn't realize that hating yourself desperately 24/7 was self-obsession until I got sober and I started learning those things. But I didn't get any recovery from the other things going on in my life until I addressed my alcoholism in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, because for me, I believe it's all part of my alcoholism. And so what I mean by addressing my alcoholism is going to meetings, working with a sponsor, doing the steps, praying, meditating, all the stuff that I'm taught to do here. If I just work on my spiritual condition every day, friendship problems seem to resolve, work problems seem to resolve, finance problems seem to resolve, health problems maybe not so much, but I'm in a much better condition to deal with them. And this is still the case today with 26 years. I have to work a diligent program so there's no breach in security. I mean, seriously, cronuts. do you want one? I'm like, one? No, I want 6. So I had to pass because I knew I couldn't just have one. It's not going to happen. But they look delicious. Very good choice. Anyway, so that's what those were my teens. My mom claimed bankruptcy when I turned 17. She knew by that time I was going to graduate from high school. I made up all my credits in my senior year so I could graduate with my class, and that was her big thing. She wanted to make sure I got through school, even though she didn't really insist that I go or not, but that was kind of when she knew she could leave. And so she claimed bankruptcy and moved home to her mother, my grandmother, the meanest human being who ever lived. And my mom and grandma were my only family. Any long weekend, any vacation, we didn't go anywhere except to my grandma's house. And we'd go sit in my grandma's tiny little house that was falling down, and my mom and grandma would smoke all day and watch brown TV like Bonanza and all these brown shows, and they were in their house coats and the house was brown and it was filled with smoke, and then we'd go out to dinner that night. Thankfully, we'd finally leave the house. They'd go to the bar first. I'd stay locked in the car while they went in the bar, listen to music, be missing my friends back home, pissed that I'm there, hating them. And then we'd go to dinner, and then it was back in the day where you could smoke at restaurants, so they'd stay at dinner for 2 or 3 hours, and I'd just be like, oh! Then we'd go back to my grandma's house, and my grandma would come in to say goodnight, and it went something like this. So my grandma, she'd always have a drink in her hand, and she'd be like, your grandma's not an alcoholic, I'm just a drunk. And now I know those words are the same thing, because I have a thesaurus, but I didn't know they were the same thing, so I was like, oh, okay, that's different. But she would come in and she would tell me how I ruined my mom's life and how my mom was depressed and had the horrible life she had because of me, because she was stuck with me, and if my dad was alive, how disappointed he'd be in me. And then she would tell me that she too would be dying soon, which I didn't like her, but I didn't want her to die, and I certainly didn't want my mom to experience that loss. And I learned later that she started telling my mom that she was dying when my mom was 9, and she had my mom when she was 18. So my grandma died from the age of 27 to 90 when she actually died. I am pretty sure it's the longest death on record, but I didn't know that. And so she would tell me these things, and I would it was horrible. I mean, I would be horrified by this, and then she'd wrap it up by saying something like, sweet dreams. And so when my mom claimed bankruptcy and moved home to my grandma, I was like, cool, Cuckoo Town is all contained. I can live the way I want to, although I had always lived the way I wanted to. I've never been grounded. I've never had any rules. I've always just run wild, but it's that idea, I'm finally free of those crazy women. And but my drinking continued to be a problem. I mean, it was always a problem, and it only got worse the older I got. And I started doing more outside issues. I'd get involved in different kinds of drugs, and when I would run my life into the ground, I could always stop whatever that other thing was because alcohol was there. But then I'd always end up back with something, some party favor. And I kept running my life into the ground, and I had also started a pattern in my life of overlapping, and what I mean by that is I'm in a relationship, and when you're first in a relationship, you get those wonderful butterflies, and just life is better, everything's better, and suddenly you're like, I don't know what I was worried about yesterday, life is beautiful. And then you're in a relationship for a while, and as those butterflies die down in a mature relationship, a long-lasting love replaces those butterflies. But for me, when those butterflies started dying down, I blamed you because you put them there, and if I don't feel them anymore, it's because you're not doing whatever you used to do to make me feel that way. In fact, there's about 5,000 things you should do if you really love me, and I'm going to list them for you. And so that would never go well. So then I'd find someone else who would give me the butterflies, but I had to get them first before I could leave this one, so that a lot of overlapping in my world. And so my life was getting messier and messier, and I was kind of in an overlap situation, but I had grown tired by then. I was in my 20s, and my world had gotten so much smaller, and people that were close to me weren't anymore, and I just hated myself more than ever, which I couldn't even imagine was possible. And so my roommate was out of town, and I took a bottle of pain medication and drank a bottle of vodka, and then sat there for a couple minutes, and then I went, uh-oh, no one's gonna find me, because I had no one. Like, my world was so small at that time, and I was in between guys. And so I thought, oh God. So I called the suicide hotline. True story, there was no answer. Story of my life. And so I called information, and I asked for another suicide prevention line. They gave me a number. I called it. I said, this is what I took. This is what I drank. If I make myself sick, will I be okay? And they said, no, you need to call 911. I'm like, oh, yeah, I don't want to. But I did. And so I called 911. I'm like, hey, so I took this, I drank this, but I'm cool. I'm sitting here. I'm fine. Can I just make myself sick? They said, no, we need to send an ambulance. I'm like, oh, okay, well, you don't need the siren and all of that. So the next thing I hear is, woo, woo, and running down the hall of my apartment. And then the paramedics come in, and they are totally hot. And so I'm like, hey, how you doing? And they're like, ma'am, we need to get you on the stretcher. So they take me to the hospital, and I have my stomach pumped. And after you have your stomach pumped, they fill you full of charcoal. So I'm rocking the charcoal frown. And they send in the doctor who's supposed to evaluate me and put me on a 72-hour hold. I meet him and talk him out of it, like, oopsie, I didn't mean to. I don't know what happened, mister. And so he ends up sending me home, and I get a good night's sleep. And I wake up the next day with a brilliant idea, and that's to go visit those nice paramedics. And the paramedic station was just across the street, so I got up and I feathered my hair like Farrah. And if you don't know who Farrah is, Google her. Her hair was fabulous. And I got all cute, and I went over to the paramedic station, and I said, hi, remember me? You took me to the hospital last night. I tried to kill myself. How's it going? So embarrassing, right? But it's such a great example of that thing that maybe some of you suffer with. Like, I'm a piece of crap, and then I'm awesome. So it's like, my life is so small, I have no other option than to take my own life. I'm so lonely, and I'm gonna kill myself. And yet, in a second, I'm like, I'm hot, maybe I'll get lucky. What is that, you know? And I think thinking you're a piece of crap or thinking you're the best are equally as dangerous, and that humility is found somewhere in between. But back then, you know, I was constantly like, I'm a piece of crap, I'm better than you know, all the time. And my roommate at the time had a brother who had a little problem with crack cocaine, and his mean wife had kicked him out, and he needed a place to stay, so he came to live with us. And he had said he was done with the crack pipe. It was just magic. He hadn't been to any program or anything. But we didn't know any better. And so he moved in with us, and the thing I liked most about him is he was crazy about me. And it absolutely didn't matter how I felt about him, because I just needed somebody to love me so I'd be okay. And so I learned very quickly that he had not put that crack pipe down, because he was acting really weird. And I don't know about you, but it's really hard for me to be with somebody who has a different buzz. And so what happened was, I asked him one day, I asked him for some. And he gave it to me, and within 6 months of doing that with him, I lost everything. I got evicted from where I lived, I got fired from my job, and he sold my car for a piece of crack cocaine, which at that time went for about $20. And I had no place to go, and it was my best friend's parents, Diana. Diana and I grew up together. We've been best friends since kindergarten, and we used to party together, but she grew out of it, moved to San Diego, was going to school, living a big life, and I continued to live in and around our hometown, circling the drain. And when I had no place to go, it was her parents that took me in. And they were like the families that I saw on TV. They sat down and ate at a regular time, and they talked about their day, and they talked about their life, and they were cool too, because they also drank. So they were fun, but they were also super wholesome, and they took me into their house, which was such a healing thing. but not enough to get me sober. I'd been to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous with people who really needed it because, you know, I'm a good friend. But I just knew it wasn't for me. You know, the God stuff for sure was going to be a problem. I wasn't raised with any kind of religion, and if there was a God, I didn't care for his work so far, so I'm not into that. And then I'm too bad or I'm not bad enough. You know, some reason why it doesn't work for me. I'm so glad it works for you. Congratulations. You know, that's how I felt. And so I tried white knuckling it for a while, which was brutal and really miserable. And so one day I thought, you know, if I'm going to be miserable, I may as well be drunk and miserable. And I poured my first guilt-free drink in the longest time, and it was White Zin in the box. And I was sipping on that delicious beverage when the phone rang, and it was a guy named Jeff who worked with Diana in San Diego, whose parents I was living with. And she had given him the number, and he called, and he said, I understand you have a problem with alcohol. And I said, I do. For whatever reason, I told him the truth. And then he said, I want to give you the number of a woman to call in AA, and he gave me the number of Pat Y. And I called this woman, Pat Y, and she said, my husband Vince and I are going to a meeting. Why don't you come with us? And I did. And I get goosebumps every time I share that because a stranger called me, gave me the number of another stranger who took me to a room full of strangers, and I've been sober ever since. And when I try to articulate what God's grace is, I always come to that moment. You know, why that moment? I don't know, but I don't take it lightly. You know, I feel like, you know, I get nervous every time I talk. The first 16 years, not days, not weeks, not months, 16 years, every time I talked, I got sick. And I remember telling my sponsor, I have a medical condition that should keep me from having to speak. And she laughed as well. But part of it is because it is such an awesome responsibility. I think AA has given me anything that's good in my life has come from AA, and I don't take it lightly. And I feel like it's a great responsibility to be able to tell you that. If you get nothing out of my talk, please know that. And then, you know, there's the side order of, you know, I want your approval and I want you to like me. But that's getting so much better over the years. Anyway, so Pat and Vince took me to the big Wednesday night meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, which looked more like this. The meetings I'd been to before seemed to be pretty depressing, but it looked like the light was on in people's eyes and people were happy and sober at the same time, which I wasn't quite sure that was real, but it gave me hope and it made me wonder. And so Pat said she'd be my sponsor until I found one and started me on a really simple course of action. And, you know, when I got sober, I thought I've already wasted so much time, and I thought, you know, I really want to get a good exercise regime. I should get a good diet. I really should get a fantastic job now that I'm well, and I should quit smoking, and time for a relationship, and, you know, I had all these ideas, which luckily I said out loud and was laughed at. And then it was suggested that I just work on getting my first year foundation. And I kept hearing that in our group, first year foundation, and how important that first year foundation is to the rest of your sobriety. Like, just take that year. I felt like I had already wasted so much time. I didn't want to take a year. But that year that I spent getting that foundation has held me in good stead the last 25, you know? And so I was taught, don't quit smoking, no major changes in your first year, get a little job to go to in between meetings, no relationships, you know, all the time and energy I'd want to put into going into school, put that into getting my steps done, and no relationship, which I just thought was crazy, because I've been in relationships since I was 10. So I just thought that was crazy talk, but I had gotten to the point where I thought, I'm going to do everything I'm asked to do, and when it doesn't work out, I can go on with my glamorous life, which luckily I haven't had to do. So I was going to regular meetings on regular days and calling Pat every day. And when I was about 2 weeks sober, a family friend came forward and told me all these secrets that my mom had kept from me. And I always knew that my mom and grandma had secrets. They argued a lot, but didn't say a lot of words. When they were together, they might say one word that would injure the other, and then they wouldn't speak, and then they'd talk through me, or one would cry, or on the phone, you know your mother, you know your grandmother. And so there was always something between them, and they had a secret language even. They talked in a language with Z's. I've heard from Sharon B. actually told me that it's Carney talk, but they had a whole secret language even. And so I knew that there were secrets, but I wasn't able to find out any proof of that after going through all of their personal belongings over the years. And so I had given up that idea. And so this family friend comes forward and tells me all these secrets, and I'm like, I knew it, which is my favorite thing to say. So he told me these secrets, and I'm like, and I wrote down everything he said, because when you hurt me, I like to be super specific when I throw it in your face. And so I wanted to have every bullet point. And so I had my list, but instead of going to my mom, I called Pat. And I told Pat everything I had found out, and she said, it's so good you have that written down, because you're gonna need that later. And I had no idea what she meant. And she said, but for now I want you to work on being a good daughter and granddaughter, which I thought was crazy, and maybe she's deaf, because how does this even make sense? But I had gotten to the point where I had made that decision that I would say yes, And so, but I don't know what a good daughter and granddaughter is. So we came up with a formula, and that's that I'd call once a week, I'd write once a week, and I'd visit as often as I could. And if I were doing these things, I would know at the end of the day when my head hit the pillow that I'd been a good daughter and granddaughter, and maybe, just maybe, I'd be able to stay sober. Because where my mom and grandma were concerned, I felt fierce love and loyalty. I mean, there was just the three of us. I was told that my whole life, it's just us three. We can only rely on each other. And so there was that sense of, I protected them. I mean, I could talk smack about them, but if you said anything, that's just not okay. So there was that protection, but there was shame and blame and hatred, all at the same time, and it created this sense of angst. And I don't know if I hadn't started taking these actions right away, if I could have stayed sober, feeling that way. And so I started sending a card once a week, and I'd get a card that already said something, and I'd write, love Georgia. And then I started making the weekly calls super awkward, so I'd always have a topic, like maybe a current event or something that I heard happened in their town or something, just so it wasn't so awkward. And then eventually I started hearing about how you guys were making amends to your family and writing letters, so I started writing a little bit more every week. And then I started, as I do, getting grandiose and thinking about how they must be saving all of these cards, and maybe they're keeping them in a beautiful decorative box, or maybe tying them with a lovely ribbon, and maybe rereading them from time to time, like, oh, remember this one? Oh, that Georgie. But that's not what was happening. I found out many, many months into this when I made the weekly call to my mom, and my mom said, well, we got your card, but Grandma's been having to wipe them out to reuse them, and we're wondering if you could start writing them in pencil. And and so I did. I wrote those cards in pencil, and I want to tell you why. It was because I now had a sponsor who told me that I'd never have to go through anything alone if I chose, that I could bring all my problems to her. I was starting to have an experience of a higher power, my own higher power, as a result of going through the steps with a sponsor. I had more friends than I ever dreamed of, like real friends, and I had more tools than I ever knew even existed. And it may not be fair, but he with the most tools has the most responsibility, and in this case it was me. And so I wrote those damned cards in pencil, and for a while I wrote a little bit less to punish them, and they didn't notice. Never noticed my punishments. But I did write those cards in pencil and eventually picked up the pace again. And my relationship with my mom and grandma was really that. I called, I wrote, I visited. A real phone call went like this. Well, we wanted to wish you a happy birthday, but you didn't call. And so I learned that on my birthday I could do what I do every year, which is pace by my phone and say, I know they're not going to call. I know they're not going to call. And then at the end of the day when they don't call, say my favorite thing, I knew it. Or, learning in Alcoholics Anonymous contrary action, I could, on my birthday, call them and say, today's my birthday and I just want to tell you I love you. Okay, bye-bye. And enjoy the rest of my day. What? Like, these are crazy, simple ideas that never occurred to me. I remember hearing Sharon B. talk about hearing a sad song on the radio and changing the station. And I was like, never occurred to me. Like, I hear a sad song, I lean in, I'm like... I might even pull down the rearview mirror and look. And then if a happy song follows, quickly try and find another sad song. I'm an emotional cutter. I like to go deep. And it just never occurred to me that I had a choice in these things. And so this whole experience with my mom and grandma taught me something that's held me in good stead in every other area of my life, and that's the only power I have exists on my side of the street. And I am only responsible for my side of the street. What you do on yours, none of my business. I don't need to determine if you're worthy of my love. I don't need to worry about any of that. All I have to worry about is who I want to be. I want to be a good daughter and granddaughter. That doesn't mean that I want to be a good daughter and granddaughter if it's received and reciprocated. There's none of that. It's just, I want to be a good daughter and granddaughter, and I get to do that regardless of how they behave. And so the dirtier someone else's side of the street is, the cleaner mine needs to be, and that became like my job. And as I was making that living amends right away, I went through the steps with a sponsor, and I'm on my 4th sponsor now. I've been with her for 24 years. I've never had a bad sponsor. I've had just the people I needed in my life at just the right time, and today I know I'm with the right sponsor if I can answer yes to 2 questions. The first one is, do I want what they have? And the second one is, do I trust their judgment? And if I can answer yes to those 2 questions, I'm with the right person. I don't need to debate their direction. I don't need to wonder, on the other side of it, being grandiose, like, have I outgrown them? Is it time for me to look for someone else? You know, I don't have to do all that. I just have to ask those 2 questions, and if I can answer yes, I can just chill. And so I ended up making it to my first year. In our group, we have a watch when you turn 1. So the night before you turn 1, everybody gathers at a coffee shop, and they gather around your table as it gets closer to midnight, and they go 10, 9, 8, and then at midnight they sing happy birthday. And it may not translate, but it is a rite of passage in our group, and the only way you can have a watch is you have to go to watches, so you don't sleep for like a year because you're going to all your classmates' watches. But I was really so excited to make it to my watch, and I had like 200 people that showed up at my watch, and I knew everybody there except for one person, and I couldn't believe how much my life had changed in just a year. And I had followed that direction to stay out of a relationship for a year and about an hour and a half. And so at about 1:30 a.m., I consummated a relationship with my new fella, and we got engaged 10 days later, and we got married 6 months later. And we were married my first 5 years of sobriety, and those were some of the best years. I mean, because we always put AA first, we always stayed really close to our sponsors. And so when it didn't work out, which really wasn't a surprise, I guess, we were both able to stay in the same home group, and both able to stay sober. We're still in the same home group today. And as soon as we split up, I got involved with someone else right away. Surprise. I had stopped the overlapping, but I was still looking for something on the outside to fill that emptiness I was feeling. And I was beginning to learn that the only way to fill that emptiness that I had, that I was trying to fill with all these different things, is by giving. Like, getting feels good. When somebody loves me, it feels good, but it's never filled that emptiness. The only thing that fills that emptiness is me being of service. When I'm lonely, I have to pick up the phone. I have to take the actions. It's the love that I put out that fills up that emptiness. But it was slower for me to learn in relationships. So I got involved with this guy. My life was operating at a super high velocity. I had a great job. I was doing tons of meetings. I was doing tons of service work. Like, anybody was sick, I was taking meetings to their house and people back and forth to the hospital, and just whatever I could do. Service, work. And then I was taking classes, and my life was filled 24/7, action. And then I had to have a second back surgery in sobriety. I had minor back surgery early on, but I had to have a lumbar fusion where they were going to go through the front, which is better for your back, but it's a longer recovery time. And so I was looking at a 6-month recovery time if everything went well. But I was in that 1% where things did not go well, and I ended up being bedridden for about a year. And during that time, I lost everything except my sobriety. I was diagnosed with something called Reflex Sympathetic Dystrophy. At first, they thought I had a blood clot because my legs swelled up, it turned bright red. It was hot. I couldn't have anything touch it. Not even the weight of a sheet could touch my foot. And so they rushed me to the hospital and did all these tests to see if I had a blood clot. But the doctor who did my spinal surgery had had a patient for a year before me that he couldn't diagnose with this weird disease called RSD. And so he knew. He knew when he saw me and I didn't have the blood clot, he knew what it was. And so he sent me to this specialist who was doing kind of guinea pig operation, well, procedures and operations as it regards to this disease. Because in the past, what they would do is just amputate the affected limb, or you could end up paralyzed from it. And so I'm recovering from my back surgery, but now I'm seeing the specialist. I'm going to the hospital every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I'm having cervical and lumbar punctures where they're going in with x-ray into my spine and doing injections. And the leg that was affected, they would elevate and fill with an IV for 20 minutes. And this was like every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And I was in so much pain already from my back surgery. And it was my home group that took care of me. And the people that I thought should be there, like my mom and my grandma, who were available, had cars, lived about 200 miles away, couldn't be there for whatever reason, but just the people I needed were there. And that's how it's always been. Like, I look back at the seemingly worst times of my life, and they've turned out to be some of the best times of my life, where I've connected with people at a real level, where I've laughed the hardest and I've cried the hardest, and I've been the most supported and the most loved. And I had to have babysitters every night, and I had people coming to babysit for me who I honestly wouldn't have had a cup of coffee with. I'm like, ooh, yeah, not her. I mean, there's this ex-nun who was gonna come help me. I'm like, no, not her. She ends up coming over, and she brought a guitar, and that girl gets down, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And so we became fast friends. It's kind of like when you share a commitment with somebody, and you're like, oh, gotta share a commitment with her or whatever, and then you get to know them, and you're I think it's just fear. But also, it was so humbling to have people taking care of me. I mean, like, I needed help with everything, but I learned that that was a way I could be of service, just as other people had allowed me to be in their home and to help them when they had had surgeries and been in trouble. To allow people to come in and help me was a way I could be of service. And people were bringing meetings to my house and taking me to meetings, and taking a beach chair that they put in the back of the room at my Saturday night meeting. And then on Wednesday night, the big Pacific group meeting, there's kind of wings off the stage. So I'd have my chair off one wing where you guys couldn't see me, but I could see the speaker, and I could come in and out the back door. So I could stay connected with my home group. And I was so taken care of. But that guy that I was dating was a little freaked out by all of this stuff, and so he said he'd consider a relationship and a commitment with me when I was well, and he dumped me. And I was devastated. And I called my sponsor, Marilyn S., and who's been my sponsor now for 24 years, to tell her the latest of my drama. You know, first it's I have to have surgery, then it was now there's complications, then it was I can't drive, I've got to get rid of my car, I can't keep my job, I've got to give my job up, I can't pay my bills, I'm borrowing money to pay bills. And then it was, I've got to move. Then it was, now I got dumped. And so at that time, Marilyn was learning how to play guitar. So oftentimes when I'd call her, she'd be playing in the background, and this time was no exception. And so I told her, and now I got dumped. And she said, oh, this sounds like a wonderful country western song. And she started playing a country chord progression, and she sang my blues, and it made me laugh. And that's been such a great gift of my sobriety, is finding humor in everything. Why not, right? And so I'm lucky to have a sponsor who finds a great deal of humor in my most difficult times. I am really grateful for that, because she is so funny. So I was full of uselessness and self-pity and really struggling, and I can pray for a character defect to be removed, but what normally happens is an assignment appears, and in this case it appeared in the form of a man named Mike Finch. He was 34 years old, and he had been diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease, and I watched him go from walking and talking to being paralyzed from the neck down. But the thing that never changed about him was his joy of the program, and he's always sponsoring tons of guys and just on fire for this program. And I watched him go from, he was living in Las Vegas, and he'd bring up these guys he sponsored, or they'd bring him up in the handicap van to the Wednesday night meeting. They drive all the way from Vegas and back and forth. I'm like, that's crazy. And then his wife had also left him when he was sick, and so his sponsees took him in to a house in San Diego, and they were all living there taking care of him, and they'd bring him up to the Wednesday night meeting. And he and I were friends, and then we became more than friends. And then I was able to spend the last 6 months of his life with him, which was such a great blessing. I remember people saying, you're with Mike? Isn't he dying? I mean, okay, first of all, let me just say, people say the stupidest things. Brace yourself, but know this. I believe that people are really trying to say, they're trying to connect. They don't know what to say, so they end up saying things that are just like that, like, you're with Mike, isn't he dying? And I'd say, no, he's living, and in a big way. I mean, seriously, I did call him the Make-A-Wish boy, which is very distasteful, but he had a really good sense of humor. But when you know you have limited time, you live differently, and so he was doing those things that he'd always wanted to do, you know, like the Make-A-Wish boys, and so that's what I called him. And that time was so, it was filled with so much joy and fun, and we would have huge parties at his house, and we'd go to sleep, and then we'd wake up, and there'd be people laying on the floor who weren't there the night before, who had come in from Arizona and all these different places, from Vegas, to come and see Mike. And I was taught when you're in an uncomfortable situation, you get a commitment. And so I was feeling uncomfortable. I mean, it was a terrifying time. You know, I'm with somebody who's got a fatal disease, and it was so sad and so beautiful and all those things all at the same time. And I'd read Elizabeth Kubler-Ross about death and dying, and she talked about photojournaling. And so I asked Mike if I could do that, and so he said okay. And so I took pictures every day of those 6 months, and I have like 3 photo albums that I have a set, and his family has a set. And I took pictures of everything, you know, trips back and forth to the hospital, when he had to get his feeding tube, parties. We celebrated his 15-year, you know, we celebrate big birthdays, like 5, 10, 15, but we knew he wasn't going to make it to 15, so we had a big 14-year party for him. And so all of those pictures, and my most favorite picture, I really can't show many people, is, so Mike needed help with everything, and so he was on the commode, and one of his sponsees had brought him in there and was sitting across from him on the bathtub, just going, rah, 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 talking about his life while Mike's trying to have a sacred moment. And then another one of his sponsees is sitting on the sink playing guitar, just in his own world. And that picture kind of encompasses what our life was like at that time. And it was so beautiful, and like I said, it was all of those things, but I'm so glad I got to feel it all. My whole life was spent trying to not feel. You know, I didn't want to feel because I was such a coward, but today, because of the net that Alcoholics Anonymous provides with sponsorship and God in the Steps and all the tools we have here, I get to experience life to the fullest. I don't have to worry it's going to break me anymore because this beautiful net is here. And so I'm with Mike and doing a ton of AA, and we're kind of taking care of each other, and he ended up going into hospice and dying there, but both his father and I were with him when he died, and we were holding his hand, and it doesn't always happen that way, but in this case it did. And about a month before Mike died, my grandma died, but by the time my grandma died, she turned into nice grandma. I don't even know when, but one day she started being nice grandma. She was like, you know your grandma loves you. And I was like, huh? And what's happening here? But just as I had wanted the people in my life to believe the new me, the new sober me, I chose to believe the new nice grandma, and it stayed. And I think just as our disease ripples out into the lives of the people we love, so does our recovery. And even though they never went to to any meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous or read the big book or did any of that stuff, their life changed just because of that ripple that we can create with our recovery by keeping my side of the street clean. And I'd learned to take my mommy stuff to my sponsor and to my girlfriends, and so I was able to just be there for my mom and be there for my grandma. And when she died, my relationship with her was good, and I was able to be there as a support to my mom. And then Mike died a month later, and I ended up moving back to LA and trying to get back into my life again, but I wasn't willing to do all the stuff I was willing to do when I was new, which is kind of the deal. Like today, I am super active, and as long as I'm working on my spiritual condition, going to meetings, working the steps, praying, meditating, working with newcomers, you know, going to all the stuff that we do, all of those tools, it's my choice to tap into that joy, but it's the actions that I take that tap me into that joy. They don't magically happen while I'm waiting to feel like doing something. I never feel like doing anything. I just have to do it and the feelings follow, but I didn't do that. I moved back to LA and I just was pretty miserable, and then my mom asked to see me, and I had by then got a little job and was kind of getting back into the flow of life. And I'll just say this about that. I mentioned this today too. I still have chronic pain today, and we're not supposed to say our case is different, But if you suffer with chronic pain, I believe our case is different. But what that means for me is I have to do twice as much to feel half as good. It's not that I get to do less. It means I have to do twice as much than the average bear. And today I treat my pain with Pilates and with Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's it. And any suggestions after the meeting? No. But thank you so much. I'm sure everybody has some really good suggestions, but I found something that works. Thank you anyway. But back then I was still suffering. I was still in a lot of pain back then, and I ended up going to see my mom, and she sat down with me for 2 days, where she just talked to me for 2 days and told me her whole life story and all those secrets I'd written in that book when I was new that I had never felt necessary to throw in her face. She now sat and told me, because she said she was waiting for my grandma to be gone out of loyalty to my grandma, because a lot of the stuff involved her, and my grandma was so private. And so she started by telling me that at 8 years old, my grandma was sent to live with another family because they couldn't take care of both my grandma and her sister. And so in this house, my grandma was the house girl. She cooked and cleaned and was physically and sexually abused by the men in that family. And the way she got out of that is she got pregnant by a man she didn't love with my mom at 18, had my mom. By the time my mom was born, that man had already left. And then my grandma, an 18-year-old with no skills, is now trying to raise my mom, who she's now leaving with other families and putting in boarding school and forgetting her over summers, because my grandma was just a girl. She was partying, and but my grandma would go back and visit my mom from time to time, and my mom so longed to be with her. And my grandma would always show up in shiny cars with shiny jewelry, and it's hard to resist shiny objects. And so my mom ended up going to live with my grandma and never got to see her dad again. And it turned out that my grandma was living a life of racketeering and prostitution. And so she turned out my mom to work the family business. So my mom never went to another day of school and went through that same thing of being physically abused and sexually abused. And she was pregnant at 15 and had put that baby up for adoption. And then she was pregnant at 16 and put that baby up for adoption. And as she's telling me this story, these are not the secrets that I heard when I was 2 weeks sober. When I was 2 weeks sober, the secrets I heard were, your dad was an alcoholic, a womanizer, the money he left you when he died, your mom embezzled. So it was like kind of C secrets. These were like A. These were like major. I was like, holy crap, I never even knew any of this. I had no idea about my mom's life. I had only seen my mom as what she was to me. I never even knew any of this. And so she put these babies up for adoption, and it made sense why she was so insistent that I terminate that pregnancy when I was 13. I thought she was mean and trying to take something from me, but she was scared for me, and she had been there in another way, and so she was giving me her best. She was trying to protect me based on her experience. I just didn't know what her experience was. And the story that she told me over the next 2 days about having no friendly direction. As a kid, she turned to the church when my grandma wasn't around, but then when she was pregnant, the church turned their back on her, and she really had no friendly direction. She had nobody. And it turned out that my mom was like the loneliest person I've ever heard of in my whole life, like truly had nobody. And so I'm listening to her tell this story, and I'm immediately grateful that I'd taken that action to send the card once a week, to make the call once a week, to visit, even though I didn't believe they deserved it or that I should have to do that, because it turned out that my mom was like a superhero. The fact that she was able to keep me in the same house and relatively safe, those years, was a miracle. The life that I had was the life of a princess compared to the life that she had and that my grandma had and that I could have easily had. And so I started to see my mom in this different light. And also this other sense of freedom came in, because my whole life I had felt that she had these things to give me, but was withholding them because she deemed me unworthy. And I so wanted her to see me as worthy and give me the goods, like give me the love, give me it. And it turned out she never had it to give. And so I'd been mad at her my whole life for not giving me something she didn't even possess. And so there was great freedom there. And another really big life lesson for me is that most of it has nothing to do with me. It wasn't personal. This wasn't personal at all. And so I got to have this incredible relationship with my mom, and I got to just get to know her. And her name was Betty, and I used to call her Boop. And she was so smart. and so funny. When we watched Jeopardy, because that was one of her shows, when I would visit with her, she knew every answer. Like, she knew just a little bit about everything. I could call her with any question about cooking, movies, what history, it didn't matter. She worked crossword puzzles all the time. She read all the time. She was one of the smartest people I knew. But she was, where I turned to alcohol, she turned to hoarding. Like, her house was like the kind you see on TV. It was crazy. In fact, at one point in my sobriety, being grandiose as I get, I went to my sponsor. I'm like, I need to report her. I don't know what this means, but it's like, this seems like an official stance. I'm like, I need to report her to the authorities. She can't be living this way. And my sponsor reminded me that my mom had her own higher power. It wasn't me, and that I was just to be a good daughter. And I'm so glad that I got to love her just where she was. And she was so funny. And many years later, she was diagnosed with lung cancer that then went to her bones, and then it went to her brain. And I was able to take care of her those last few months of her life using some of the stuff that I had learned taking care of Mike. And we went to the hospital. She was 75 years old, so sick. And I don't know why we're still going back and forth to the hospital for tests and stuff. And we walk in, and the x-ray technician comes out, and my mom looks directly at him and says, "This won't affect my ability to bear children, will it?" And she was so funny. And I would have missed it had I followed the well-meaning suggestions of my friends and therapists who talked about setting boundaries and not keeping secrets and confronting and all of these kind of aggressive stances. When in Alcoholics Anonymous, I've been taught about love and tolerance and about my responsibility and being accountable for my side of the street. And so I got to get to love her. And so she ended up dying in 2004, and I'm just going to wrap up here. I've got like a couple of minutes, but what happened for me after that, I had actually, before my mom died, my life had gotten kind of small again. I wasn't willing, like I said, to do all the stuff I was willing to do when I was new. And I found myself with a resentment against my home group. I wasn't going to as many meetings because I was in so much pain. And my sponsor would say things like, "Well, when you stay home from the meeting, are you in pain?" And I would say, "Mm-hmm." And she would say, "Well, why don't you come to the meeting? If you're going to be in pain anyway, come to the meeting and take care of your spiritual condition." And I'd be like, "You're so mean, you don't understand." But then I came to find out that I'm going to have pain every day. So I can live my life with pain, or I can stay at home and be miserable. So she was right. She's always right. But my world had become pretty small, and I went out with a guy. Well, I actually married a guy I shouldn't have been on a second date with. Not his fault. I just saw red flags, painted him green, didn't care. He never tried to be anything he wasn't. I just didn't want to see it. And so I was in this miserable marriage. My mom died. I have a resentment against my home group, so I'm not going to very many meetings. I'm in pain. And my world got smaller and smaller, and I found myself suicidal with double-digit sobriety. And I remember exactly where I was standing when I realized a couple of years had gone by, and I had been waiting for my feeling to change my action, which I had learned the opposite early on, but because I'd gotten so distant from a regular routine, I was still going to like one meeting a week, but I wasn't doing what I was doing. I need to do a lot just to be even. And I remember where I was standing, and I realized I can't drink. That's not an option. And for me, I believe if you kill yourself, you have to come back and repeat the lessons of this life. And I'm like, screw that, I'm halfway done. There's no way I'm doing this again. And so I thought, how do I best want to pass the rest of this wretched time on this planet? I mean, really, that was the starting point. And I thought maybe I can do something for someone else. And I'd been volunteering at the Midnight Mission on holidays and stuff like that. And I thought, well, I'll go get busy there, because I honestly didn't know if I wanted to be a grocery checker or a brain surgeon. Like, I had no passion for anything. Nothing moved me. So I started volunteering at the Midnight Mission, and then I did something crazy, and I beefed up my program, started going to a ton of meetings again, and asked my sponsor to go through the steps again. And I did that, and just like it always does, it works. I got to tap back into that joy, and I finally became complete, and I was able to leave that marriage that I shouldn't have been in to begin with, but I got to leave it cleanly, and I was finally made complete. I was always looking for somebody to complete me. It's such a romantic notion, you complete me. But that means without you, I'm incomplete, and now you're responsible for my happiness, and I'm going to resent you, and I'm going to overlap you. So, doesn't work. So I finally became complete, and so now the relationships I have in my life enhance my life. and another freedom that I found. And next to getting sober, working at the Midnight Mission is the greatest joy of my life. I was working there as a volunteer, and suddenly a position became available, as it does oftentimes when you're doing the, I take the actions and stay out of the results. And they created a job for me there. And this job, I couldn't have pictured this job on my own. I couldn't have put it together, but it uses everything I have. Everything I have, I leave on the field every day. I think that's the right sports term. But every day, I leave there having used everything that I have in my experience and soul and heart, and I get to take all the love and joy and hope I get in these rooms to Skid Row every day, and it's such a great joy. And one last thing, and I promise I'll sit down, is music. I've always found music really cathartic, as I mentioned earlier, and I love to sing, find it very cathartic. Not so much for my audiences, as it turns out, which I thought is heartbreaking. We're taught to follow our passions and desires, and I thought, how could God give me this passion and desire and then have me suck at it? And it's not that I didn't work. I took private lessons and group lessons, and I can kumbaya. I do a lot of AA shows that are for fun or for free, and you get what you pay for. But I thought, why would God do this to me? And I really felt like it was such a source of pain. But when I came to work at the Midnight Mission, I met all these people who have no access to music. And my life is ridiculously good, and I need music every day. And so I started a music program for our homeless community, where I bring musicians to play for our homeless community. And through that, I learned that maybe God gives us these passions and desires, not for us to shine, but for it to shine through us. And so I just need to follow whatever those passions and desires are, but just stay out of the way for the results, because God has a much better plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Georgia, for coming and sharing your experience. You had a great message. We're right up against it, so a couple quick announcements and we'll get out of here. There's always a meeting after the meeting. If you're new, you want to get involved with this group, grab somebody after the meeting. If you want to help us with some service work, we could always use help with the chairs. We got to leave 7 rows, 5 across. It's customary for us to form a line and thank our speakers. They come here on their own time and expense. And if you care to join us, we have a nice way of closing. Thank you.